Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here again with another amazing episode of the Challenge Show. And this is about how an organization that claims to be advocating for children with intellectual disabilities and other developmental disabilities discriminated grossly against me whilst in search of a job. This organization, which name I would not like to mention in order not to defame, was a Danida-funded project in Ghana around the year 2011-2012, thereabouts. And so they published that they were recruiting an advocate officer, which I found very interesting because then I knew I was going to use my experiences gathered over the years growing up as a person with disability. And so I applied for the position. And the major job description of this position was to form and sensitize parent groups, on circumstances surrounding this condition. And so you see why I found it interesting and as a good, opportunity. Eventually, two of us were shortlisted for the interview, and on the D-Day I went for the interview. Unfortunately, I was informed that I failed the interview. Now, not too long after this conversation, not too long after the interview, I was called by one member of staff. She was a volunteer from Holland, and she made a telephone call to me to say that I should keep on praying, and the organization was probably going to reconsider me for the job position. I was a bit surprised, so I asked her how, and all she said was, just keep on praying. And so, after a period of time after this conversation with the volunteer, the project manager of this organization made a telephone call to me and asked me to come to his office for a discussion. And so I went because I was in dire need of a job, years after national service without a job, and you could just imagine. But before I continue, let me take the opportunity to tell you that you don't actually fail all the interviews you attend. You actually qualify for some of these positions of interviews you have attended. You see, people are wicked, and you don't have to trust our system, especially in Africa or in Ghana. People do all kinds of stuff to impede you if God doesn't intervene. And so they sometimes end up recruiting people who don't even qualify, leaving you out. And let me assure you that it could happen to a person with disability. It could happen to any other person, because people do these things based on reasons known to them alone. But today, since I don't want to go away from the theme, my program is mainly on persons with disability. So let me just pause here. So as I told you, he made a telephone call and invited me to his office. And in the office, I sat face to face with the manager, and the first thing he did was to apologize to me. He went on to explain that I was actually the one that qualified for the position when we attended the interview. But then he did all kinds of things to make sure I don't beat the other woman with a higher mark. And this was because he was speaking to the woman before the interview. And so he gave her all the background information of the organization just to ensure that she take up the position. And let me tell you what actually happened. There were 2 people on the panel, and anytime I was asked a question, he read into his colleague to know if I attracted a higher mark. And then he gave me like 1/4 of the mark, even though he knew I deserved a higher mark. However, after all these atrocities, I still maintain a lead with like 1 or 2 marks higher than this woman. And so it was time for them to deliberate on who to take up the position. And from the horse's own mouth, from the mouth of the project manager, his own words, he told me that he was able to convince his colleague that once I'm a person with disability and they are located on the first floor, all these factors were indications that I was going to be slow on the work, and he thinks that it will impede the work. And once he was the project manager, the other panel member was only a board member. So it was actually the, the project manager that was going to work with the advocate officer. And so the woman left it out for him to decide. And he eventually chose the lady. You see, so I asked him to pause, and I asked him, so why are you now having this discussion with me? Because you have already decided who to take up the position. And then he explained to me that unfortunately the woman could not perform, he could not deliver, and he wanted to reconsider me. He wanted to try me for 6 months and see if I will be able to do the job. And so, as I told you earlier, I was in dire need of a job, and immediately I accepted the offer. And this is a job I did more than the 6-month probation. I was confirmed until I did not want it again. I resigned myself. The reason why I'm sharing this with you is, we are in a system that cannot be trusted. As I said earlier, people do all kinds of things based on reasons best known to them. But what I found awkward with this situation or this scenario was that this is an organization that claims to be advocating for persons with disability. And I thought that I was the best person for this position. It was not as if I did not qualify during the interview. I actually did, but he used my disability to discriminate against me, gave out the work to another person, and had to call me back just because the lady or the woman could not deliver. That was the only time that I came to his mind again. And he even went on to tell me that they did not want to incur any cost, and that is why they could not call for another interview, but rather decided to try me. But thanks be to God that I've been able to do this job. I've been able to perform, until I did not want it again. I am most of the times convinced that there are a lot of people who claim to be working or advocating for persons with disabilities, and the only reason why they are doing this is because of their stomach. It is not as if it's something they have a passion for. They are actually exploiting persons with disability for their own selfish interest. But I want to say that every one of us is going to give an account of whatever we do here on earth. The resources, the talents, and whatever we have been endowed with, we are going to give an account, whether you believe it or not. And we must be careful with some of these things. Back home, there were a lot of opportunities, that came for persons with disability to travel out. And people will actually sell out these opportunities to able-bodied people, leaving persons with disabilities out. And I found it disheartening. And that is why, as I go through some of these things in life, I write them down, I pile them, and I knew that one day I was going to come out with something like this to expose all those atrocities and how people have been bad to me. And I think the organization, I don't know whether it's still in existence or not, but if they are watching me, they know what I'm talking about. And I even shared it with some few people. So if they are watching me, they know what I'm talking about, and they know it's true. And all these people who claim to be working or advocating for persons with disabilities or children with disabilities, it is not as if it's their passion. They are only exploiting these people because of their own selfish interest. But God is watching. Thank you very much for watching. Please share the program. If you think there is anybody out there that needs to see this, kindly share it. Share it. Please share it and subscribe to the Challenge channel. Thank you very much. Until I come again with another amazing story. Thank you. Goodbye.